Let me start with a little poll. Who of you considers himself or herself as a disciplined person? Not so many. And who dares to admit that he lacks or she lacks discipline? Oh, that's much more. Well, for those of you who are disciplined, the good news is that you live longer and you have better life prospects, in average anyway. And for those of you who lack discipline, the bad news is that this will never change. The good news, however, is that you don't have to blame yourself. You might change your environment. I'm sure if you look at me and you heard the introduction, that you will think that I'm a very, very disciplined person. I write and did books. I'm a professor in philosophy. I'm not overweight. I'm not an alcoholic. But to be honest, I am not. I'm not a disciplined person. But what I'm very good at is at delegating my discipline to other people or to my environment. I'll explain about that more later, but first, why do we need discipline? Well, the answer is very simple. Because we live in an abundance. Both the poor and the rich live in an abundance of foods, drinks, cars, smartphones, information. And we experience that it is often very difficult to survive that abundance. We need discipline. But discipline is something that we feel uncomfortable about. We feel unease with discipline. This unease is rooted in the 1960s. At that time, the authority of fathers, medical doctors, university staff, priests was challenged. People wanted to be free. They wanted to enjoy the sex, the drugs, and rock and roll. And teachers should leave those kids alone. In the 1970s, this idea of challenging discipline got a philosophical foundation with the book of the French philosopher Michel Foucault. His book, Discipline and Punish, became a philosophical bestseller, and I think it's still, even today, one of the best-sold books in philosophy. And Michel Foucault showed that disciplinary institutions such as schools, hospitals, and workplaces discipline us in very, very subtle ways, often invisible. And the readers of his book thought that it would be best to do away with all discipline and also with all disciplinary institutions. Today, about 40 years later, we experience how difficult it is to live in a world of abundance without discipline. How do we survive the abundance of goods, the abundance of foods and drinks? Many of us are overweight and many have problems with alcohol. How do we survive the abundance of time? Today we can do everything 24/7 hours a day, 7 days a week. And even with so much time, we are in a hurry. We feel a lack of time. How come? And how do we survive the multitude of relationships that we can have today? Sexual relationships, love relationships. And how to survive the multitude of options to live your life. Well, there are people who are able to live well in this plenty, and those are the ones with self-discipline. So congratulations, some people. And indeed, research in psychology shows that you live healthier and you have better prospects in life. But many of us lack self-discipline. And that's actually not so strange, because in a society without discipline, it's very hard to become disciplined. Self-discipline is something that you develop during your childhood. And if you have parents or teachers who don't teach you discipline, then it's almost impossible to develop self-discipline. And developing self-discipline at a later age is, for most of us, a mission impossible. And that's especially so if you acknowledge that there are temptations which are really stronger than the human force. That's an ancient problem. Already the ancient Greeks wrote about the fact that there are temptations which are really too strong for human beings. We do not have the force to resist them. So, rather than blaming ourselves for our lack of discipline, I'd like to suggest another solution. And that solution is that you delegate your discipline to your environment. And that could be either your network of human relations in which you function or operate, or delegating it to apparatuses, for example, to apps. I told you that I'm not a disciplined person, but that I'm very good at delegating discipline to others. And if I look at my network of relationships, I see that I use many people to be disciplined. For example, I cannot write books without a publisher. I really need a publisher to whom I promise that chapter 1 will be ready in May, and chapter 2 will be ready in June, and so on. So I need a publisher to be disciplined. And the same is true for exercise. I never go to the gym or never go do any sports if there are no friends waiting for me. And the idea behind this becoming disciplined is that if you delegate it to your network, it implies that you promise that you will act in a certain way or that you will keep a deadline. And you try to keep that promise, and you know that if you don't keep it, that other people will keep you to your promise. And that's a way of delegating your discipline. And you can also do that by way of apps. There are apps today, for example, the app Lift, which helps you to discipline your behavior with regard to brushing your teeth, not eating too much, drinking enough water, and so on and so on. And another example that I use myself is the app Runkeeper, which helps you to regularly run and also to be connected through this app to a community of people who also like to run or bike or whatever. A good example of a person who used an app to reach what she valued in life is, oh, there is one disappeared. Well, anyway, a good example is the book by Zadie Smith, a British novelist. She wrote the book N.W., and at the end of the book, she thanks two apps called Freedom and Self-Control, and those apps block the access to the internet. And she thanks the apps because it really helped her to have time to write the book. So, to conclude, don't be ashamed if you lack discipline. We need discipline more than ever before, but we shouldn't look in ourselves to find the discipline, but we should look to our environment. You can strengthen your networks, you can use technologies, you can delegate your discipline to apparatuses, and that's a much easier and also a much more equal way to reach self-discipline. Thank you very much.